One of the blessings of the nuclear negotiations was that the animosity of American officials towards Iran, Iranians, Islam, and Muslims was revealed to everyone. Just one of the statements made by Iran's leader, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, today, in which he also blasted the U.S.'s human rights record, calling the U.S. the biggest violator of human rights. In this edition of the debate, we'll be discussing statements made by Iran's leader and have our guests put that into perspective for us regarding Iran's relationship with the U.S. and Iran's regional role. Has Iran's relationship with the West and the United States entered a new era to include cooperation? Does everything hang in the balance due to the nuclear deal? The answers to those questions and more coming up shortly.
In a speech to a large number of Iranian citizens and officials, the leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Khamenei, covered a range of issues, including human rights and the Geneva talks over Tehran's nuclear energy program. Ayatollah Khamenei strongly condemned the U.S. officials' claims about alleged human rights violations by other countries.
بسیاری از دولت‌های غربی هستیم به خاطر نقض حقوق بشری که اونها انجام میدن. ما مدعی هستیم، ما از اونها سوال میکنیم، ما گریبان آنها رو میگیریم در پیشگاه دادگاه افکار عمومی دنیا و اونها جوابی ندارن.
The leader described the U.S. as the biggest violator of human rights.
آمریکا بزرگترین نقض کننده حقوق بشر است در دنیا. نه دیروز، همین امروز، همین حالا هر کسی دیگه ای درباره حقوق بشر حرف بزنه، آمریکایی‌ها حق ندارن درباره حقوق بشر حرف بزنن.
Ayatollah Khamenei turned to the recent talks between Iran and the P5+1 group of countries in Geneva, saying the nuclear negotiations revealed the U.S. hostility towards Iran. Ayatollah Khamenei also dismissed Washington's claim that Tehran has been forced into negotiations under the pressure of Western sanctions. He said Tehran has already announced that it would negotiate with, quote, the Satan to deter its mischief.
امروز اینا خیال میکنن که به خاطر فشار تحریم و محاصره اقتصادی ملت دستهاشو بالا برده در مقابل اونها و تسلیم شده. نه آقا، اشتباه میکنید. اشتباه میکنید. این ملتی که دستهاشو به علامت تسلیم بالا ببرد نیست.
Meanwhile, Ayatollah Khamenei urged vigilance against Iran's adversaries.
کسی توهم نکند که اون کسانی که در مقابل انقلاب اسلامی ایستاده بودند با همه قوا امروز اینا منصرف شدن. نه، امروز هم ایستادند. مدعا هر دشمنی اگر چنانچه ناچار شد عقب نشینی میکنه. اگر مجبورشون کردید، وادارشون کردید و عقب نشینی، ناچار عقب نشینی میکنن، اما از دشمنی منصرف نمیشوند.
The leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution also referred to Washington's full support for Israel. He said the U.S. is to blame for the Israeli regime's atrocities against Palestinians. Ayatollah Khamenei's comments come as U.S. lawmakers are mustering support in the Senate for a new round of sanctions against Iran over its nuclear program. Reports say over 50 U.S. lawmakers have voiced support for a draft bill calling for new sanctions on Iran if it fails to live up to the Geneva deal. Many believe that the lawmakers are acting under pressure from Israel and influential pro-Israeli lobbies to derail last November's landmark nuclear deal between Iran and the P5+1 countries.
Let me introduce our guest for this edition of the debate. Professor at the University of Tehran, Fuad Azadi, joins us here in the studios. And we have Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute, Richard Weitz, who joins us from Washington. Gentlemen, welcome. Fuad Azadi, your reaction to statements made by Iran's leader included the U.S. being the biggest violator of human rights and the animosity of American officials towards Iran, Iranians, Islam, and Muslims.
Yes, I think a problem that we have in the United States is that we don't have a consensus with regard to what the U.S. policy toward Iran should be. We have the Obama team that wants to engage Iran and eventually lift sanctions against Iran. to some degree at least. And then we have some members of the US Congress, the people who have signed the new sanctions bill, that want to increase sanctions, want to pressure Iran more, want to get Iran to surrender to US demands. And since we have this disagreement, we have a rhetoric coming from Washington that's quite, it's not very productive. The rhetoric from President Obama is that all options are on the table. He basically threatens to attack Iran militarily every week or so. And he has to do this because he needs to show that he is tough with Iran. He needs to show that the criticism that comes from the US Congress, the criticism that comes from Israeli Prime Minister, the criticism that comes from the Israeli lobby in the United States is not justified. And the result of that negative rhetoric is what you see in Tehran, which is basically a reaction to what American officials say. The Iranian leaders are going to take these threats seriously. We are dealing with a country, the United States, that has attacked two of Iran's neighbors, Iraq and Afghanistan. We are dealing with a country that is killing civilians basically on a daily basis using drones. We have a government that is violating the human rights of many of its own citizens by listening to their conversations and tapping their phones. So we have, if we want to use Noam Chomsky's terminology, we are dealing with a rogue state in the United States. And when you have a government like that, the reaction in countries like Iran is not going to be very positive.
Well, Richard White's Fuad Uzaidi is making a point there about how there's no consensus in terms of the U.S. president and lawmakers. Just today, 2 more senators are now part of this Nuclear Weapon-Free Iran Act, as they call it, which is supported now by 56 senators. You know, this doesn't help the spirit of what has occurred, which is this landmark nuclear deal. Doesn't Iran's leader have a right when he talks about the animosity that the U.S. is displaying? And we can see this particular example of these lawmakers trying to put these sanctions in place, even though they say it's if a nuclear deal is not signed.
I would agree with the statement that there's not a consensus on what the best policy to follow to Iran is. And there's also a political dynamic in which it's pretty easy to attack the Iranian government. I mean, it's for a politician, doesn't cost them very many votes, and it can maybe appeal to some interest groups. And so it's going to be difficult to promote this reconciliation and rapprochement. And the deal, though, as you mentioned, I don't want to call it landmark, but it certainly lays the possible foundations for a rapprochement. So this is one of the things we'll need to overcome as we continue to work forward.
Well, Fuad Uzaidi, let's look at the way that Iran has been very quick to criticize the U.S. time and again, and that's the respect factor. And I'd like to understand how it is that the U.S. Could even suggest that for Iran to be involved, and this is just an example, to be involved in the Geneva II talks on Syria from the sidelines, which basically is disrespecting Iran's dignity. The foreign minister has come out stating that. Why does the U.S. not realize the potential of Iran, in this case in point, and yet disrespect it by saying, well, you could participate on the sidelines, a suggestion made by the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry?
I think the U.S. government officials are making a strategic mistake because what we have in Dr. Rouhani's government are a number of technocrats that actually think that there are areas of mutual interest between Iran and the United States in this part of the world. For example, they think when it comes to opposition to terrorist organizations, in this part of the world, US and Iran share similar goals. And they're actually the majority of people who consist of Dr. Rouhani's cabinet. This is an opportunity for the United States to use Iran's influence in the Middle East to basically get some of its foreign policy goals addressed. And instead of doing that, we see the United States basically deals with Iran from a Cold War mentality. As you know, a lot of people who are in the US government now are children of the Cold War. They grew up with the Cold War, they studied the Cold War. Some of the older members of Obama administration and the people in the Congress are actually people who practiced foreign policy during the Cold War. And because of that mentality, they want to basically pressure Iran to get Iran to do what the US wants. And this is not the best way to deal with Iran. By trying to humiliate Iran, they actually don't get very far with the government of Iran, whether it's Rouhani's government or any other government. So we have a window of opportunity here for US officials to actually use. And if they can come into some sort of agreement with the current government in Iran, these people who are in Dr. Rouhani's cabinet will announce very publicly that it is possible to have some sort of mutual interest with the United States. But if these people fail, if this window of opportunity is not taken advantage of, and if Rouhani's rapprochement with the United States fails, then you can be sure that next time we have presidential elections, you will get someone like Dr. Ahmadinejad, which is going to be much tougher to deal with. So I think the United States is making a mistake with regard to how they are dealing with Rouhani's government as we speak.
Richard Weitz, how about that? I mean, we're looking at many instances that the Obama administration